And so I went fishing, and a note from the fish said, "Dear Dope, if you want to catch us, you'll need a rod and a line. Signed, the fish." So we are talking about You Must Get Them All, The Fall on Record by Steve Pringle.
That's how big it actually is. So I have mine on Kindle. That's terrifying to actually see it in the flesh, to realize how long that book is. Wow, wild. Yes, we are talking about the vocal testimony of M.E.S.
Yes. So let's read from the back. Quote from John Peel, which puts this into context. People write to me and say, "I heard The Fall. Which record should I get?" And I never have any hesitation in telling them, "You must get them all," because it's impossible to pick one. And in fact, I'll go further. I say anybody who can tell you the 5 best Fall LPs or the 5 best Fall tracks has missed the point, really. It's the whole body of the work that is to be applauded. And I thoroughly agree. John, we'll talk we'll talk quite a bit about John Peel, I'm guessing. So yeah, so just in case you don't know, The Fall were a band, I guess, from 1978 until when did Marky Smith die?
Recently, 2018, maybe. Okay, so last album, because I feel like the last album is probably
New Facts Emerge.
Yeah, was
okay, this is
2017. I feel like it was 2017, 2018 when he sadly passed away.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you've never heard that, well, I mean, it's an odd. I mean, I'm not quite sure. I'm so
actually. But can I interrupt you? May I interrupt you for a second? Because I have a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
So I'll explain. I came to The Fall by way of Clive. So I had not listened
not
to
his great fall in life, although that might.
Yes. He tempted me. I was a good angel. But no. So yeah, I discovered
he was never that good. Don't let him trick you.
No. So yeah, the Fall was not a band that was really on my radar much. To be honest, didn't know a lot about what I guess you'd call post-punk. I very much went from punk to metal, or from metal to punk, in fact. But that was my understanding of how it all worked. So this kind of branch thing of post-punk was kind of, like James Chance and the Contortionists and all of that stuff was kind of like, what the hell is this? So I came to this really, really late, living in Japan, and Clive was really did me a huge favor because this is one of these bands. The Fall is, as maybe more than any other band, a band whose discography is terrifying. It's absolutely daunting in terms of the amount of stuff there is. Just studio albums alone, how many are there? I mean, just studio albums. I mean, yes. I mean, and because that book is mostly the studio albums, and then there's an enormous.
Let's say there was probably on average one a year for 40 years, so there must be close to 40 studio albums, I'm guessing.
Right, and then you've got a huge amount of variable quality live recordings and other stuff, B-sides, and then a ton of weird compilations that have come out over the years. So Clive actually did basically from the first album through, I suppose it must have been
2008
Reformation post TLC,
right?
Maybe, or Imperial Wax Solid, maybe right up to there. Because I'm actually, the reason I know this is because the albums that I have in their entirety are the ones that come after that. Like, so the first album that I got was probably Your Future Our Clutter, and then Ersatz GB and Remit. So because they weren't sampled on this, and it was a really, Clive chose very well. I think it's an excellent introduction, and it's like 4 discs long. and they're full. Like each one is like the full 72 minutes.
It's about 4 hours of material, right?
Yeah, and for me, it grabbed me pretty much right away. And although I think, like everybody, because The Fall, what is the other famous Peel quote? Always different, always the same.
Right.
So there's this thread that runs throughout of Marky Smith and his kind of hectoring, lyrical kind of attack, and then you've got various bands and various kind of experiments over the years with different kind of music. And I would say for me, when I first went through that thing, I was really, the earliest stuff didn't grab me as much. It's a bit rougher, it's a bit more repetitive, there's a bit less melody. And by the time he marries Bricks, E. Smith, that stuff, I was like, oh, this is more like, this is interesting. It's still kind of aggressive, it's still kind of it's still weird and angular and difficult, but there's more other stuff for me to catch on to. Right. And then into I would say, and it's funny too, like I noticed going through his reviews and going through Mark Pringle, who's another person whose music reviews I have liked a lot and used a lot over the years. There are certain times, sorry?
Another Pringle.
Yeah, Prindle with a D. I thought it was quite strange that there's actually, that they're both, but the Infotainment Scan is an album that I don't think this Pringle seems to like much, but I really like that album.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, I think the Infotainment Scan was the first album I bought. Maybe it was the first CD that I actually bought myself. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm a big fan, because I think it depends as well, like when you, because obviously the band was going for 40 years. It depends what your entry point is as well, right? So that stuff was when I first got into The Fall, about 93, 94, 95, when I'm...
Well, so this is my exact question for you. Yeah. So that I just explained more or less how, and I would say the other one that really struck me is the Real New Fall LP, formerly Country on the Click. Another one where the songs you had chosen from that made me really want to hear that album in its entirety. And it's another one that I listened to a lot and still do. The theme from Sparta FC is one of the greatest songs anyone's ever written.
Right. Yeah.
In any band. It's amazing.
I particularly like the single version of that as well, actually.
Yes, it's a bit more driving and propulsive.
Yeah.
So how did you, because obviously you discovered The Fall at least a decade or two before I did. So how did you stumble into that?
It's interesting. It's one of those things, there's certain things where you have this, precog, I suppose, this weird kind of you kind of know you're gonna love something even before you. So my thing with music was, my first big music I got into was punk, right? Through an older brother, and specifically both Irish bands, actually. First the Undertones, and then Stiff Fingers. Like my brother played those in the car. So this is when I'm, I don't know, like 11, 12. So we're talking about very early 90s. Right? So it's not contemporary stuff I'm getting into. It's like over a decade. But punk, really, that was the first time it was my music. Like before that, I had a few other things, like my older sisters would have taped some, made some compilations for me, things that they had on there. Now that's what I call music, stuff more contemporary pop stuff. And that was a little bit of a gateway. But this was the first time I was like, okay, yeah, I'm all about this. So I got obsessed with kind of first wave UK punk, right? And I remember in those days, you're a teenager, you don't have that much in the way of pocket money or anything. Yeah. But you would hear about the thing that, I remember buying a book. It's funny now to think, pre-internet. I bought a book about this size, which was something like, the CD buying guide or something like that. Right. Then you just looked up bands, and I would spend hours scouring this thing. Like first I'd go to, so apart from the artists, they also had some like compilations coupled under genres. So I'd go to punk, right? And I'd look up, and there was this name kept popping up in punk compilations. There was two actually, oddly enough, that and I like both of them, but I like one a hell of a lot more than the other, were Wire and Fall. Which are both bands I really, really like, although I'm much more obsessive about the Fall than I am about Wire. But it was something about the names. I just thought, Fall, that sounds... And then the song titles were like, you know, they weren't something like, you know, Smash the State, or... They were all like cryptic, like Bingo Masters Breakout, like Just Step Sideways or something. Like what's that? Like immediately I thought, I sense I'm gonna fucking love this band. But unlike now, we wouldn't just be able to go on YouTube and hear something, and as well, your pocket money was precious, so I didn't run out and buy a Fall CD immediately, because you know, there were other things I knew I really... So for instance, before that I would have bought like a Dead Kennedys CD, or you know, stuff like that, because I had some punk compilations, but there weren't any Fall tracks on them, but I'd read about them. And at the same time, the other thing I noticed when trawling and finding out, and it's like, oh, Buzzcocks, who are they? Or, you know, oh, the Damned. It's funny now to think that you just, if you didn't have the, you wouldn't hear it, right? Unless you...
no, it wasn't on the radio. It was no. You absolutely had to work, to find stuff that was, you know.
And then the other thing that would come up all the time was almost all these like bands that I was slowly learning about, and how many there were. They all seemed to have a Peel Sessions. Oh, what's that then? So then I look up at it, and I remember the very first time I listened to John Peel, it was weird because it wasn't what I was expecting at all. Because I thought John Peel was a bloke who, at a certain point, gave all the punk bands their Peel sessions, and now his show, which was ongoing, was him just playing like
the old
tracks. I didn't know that. And I'm like, oh, I'll listen to that, because that's what I was looking for. At that before, you know, I was still pretty much focused on punk. I hadn't broadened my horizons. So I stayed up late one night to listen to them, thinking, oh yeah, finally I'm going to hear some tracks by some of these more obscure bands that I did, Slaughter of the Dogs or something. Or, you know. And then, you know, you turn it on, and the first thing he plays is, I don't know, a Jungle 12-inch, or like Diblo Dabala and Macha-Cha, or some world music. And I'm thinking, what is this? And I ashamed to say the very first time, I think I just gave up. That's not punk. I'm not listening to that. And of course, quickly, not long after that, I eventually came to John Peel, like, you know, ready for and that just, John Peel's one of those few people I will, you know, that just changed my life. Just so important to have discovered him and his show. But oddly enough, I don't think I heard the Fall first on there. I think I must have, oddly enough, I think, what would it be? Oddly enough, of all the Fall tracks to have actually heard first, I think I might have heard the cover version of I'm Going to Spain from Infotainment Scan.
That's a great song.
It is, but it's not necessarily a good example. I know it's, if you're not prepared for it, and you're not prepared for, I mean, Marky Smith's vocal delivery is quite the best of times, but
it's particularly good now, because that's what I love, how he gives up at the end of a few lines of that completely. It's like, you know, because I hate the rain and really
no, that's a great. But that was the first thing I heard. I thought, what the fuck is this? This is so strange,
weird.
And then I think I think I found Infotainment Scan second-hand CD, and I was on there, and I bought that, and pretty much, I mean, it doesn't take you long to go from 0 to 60, right? You become I think you either get obsessed with the Fall almost immediately, or it's not really for you.
It's never gonna happen. It's love at first here, or
some people, I mean, my wife's not a big fan. For example, she just doesn't, why are you listening to this old man?
Yes, well, there's that. I don't know who. There's that famous quote from somebody else that there's always an element of it sounds like, a man is wandering off the street, like a homeless man with stuff to say while a band tries to learn how to play a song.
Right.
Something along that line. And there's almost an element of that, but that's part of the energy and the kind of like the vibration.
I had no problem with it from the get-go in terms of I didn't need to justify it or have it explained to me, or for whatever reason, as soon as I heard that, it just.
Do you think language, in a weird way? I mean, because Marky Smith, first of all, I mean, he's difficult to deal with, even if you're a native speaker of English. I'd imagine a lot of American fans must just be having difficulty parsing what the hell he's saying. And on top of that, I mean, what he is saying is often obtuse and difficult, and but the poetry of it, like the obvious intelligence behind it, is it's tremendously huge fun to listen to.
Oh, it's
right. But is that
the rhythm as well?
Would it be difficult? Would it be difficult for somebody who didn't have access to the language? Because a certain amount of it is.
I don't know. I mean, because it's the rhythm. It's the so there's something about like no one else would think, but he knows exactly the same time, the right time to punctuate something with "ha" or "son" or something, and it's perfect, and it surprises you every time, and it makes you laugh. It's really difficult to explain. Either you think it's funny or you don't.
Right.
I remember the very first time, so I was listening to John Peel at this point, so I remember it when it was new, and he was playing tracks from the infotainment, not the Light User Syndrome. Well, actually, I think it would have been the Chiselers single.
Oh, yeah.
Before. The first time after the fade out, Marky Smith comes back in and goes, "Chiselers!" I remember just the thrill going down your spine, man. Jesus Christ. And no one else does that. No one else does that. I mean, obviously there's other great music out there, but there's something specific that he does.
There's an alchemy, like a mad alchemy.
Yeah.
But I think that's a song I love for one reason, because that's a great song. Absolutely great song.
Short.
But there's also an interview with him that I love, where the interviewer's question is like, so what's the Chiselers about?
Right.
Then.
Yeah.
And he's like, Chiselers. The fuck? I
think it's more, is there something like Chiselers, you twat?
Yeah.
So Pink Floyd are short, right? That's just genius. Who would think to write that down? I don't even really know what it means. No. But it's perfect.
But I'll say it's actually funny. But I realized I came to the fall another way too, though, because you gave me the CDs, but at the same time you gave me 2 books. And I'm wondering now what the second one was. I know what one of them was. One of them was
Hip Priest.
Hip Priest, the story of Marky Smith and the Fall by Simon Ford. And
it was probably his autobiography, Renegade.
I don't think so, because I bought Renegade myself. I have a copy of it. So I'm wondering if there was. Did you have another Fall book?
I don't think so. No.
Oh, never know. But then maybe that's what it was.
Right.
But I remember reading Hip Priest at a time when I was just starting to listen, and it was a weird thing to be like reading about a band and not really having a sense. But I found that book that's a great book.
Yeah, it is a good book. It is a good book.
It's very readable and very interesting, and so yeah, it was it was a dual thing. I was reading about the band and listening to them at the same time.
Well, I mean, just to reiterate that thing about, we'll give some examples of, like we said, it's just, there's an alchemy, you're quite right. But what's interesting about that is, a few bands captured that alchemy for an album or two, or singles. But pretty much the entire, I mean, I think the last 3 or 4 Fall albums are slightly less interesting. I mean, they're still better than most people's albums.
Yeah.
But they're slightly less bangers on there. Pretty much, I mean, that consistence. I know different people have their different periods that they like. I mean, it's interesting. For example, a lot of fans, Hex Induction Hour is just that's their peak, isn't it?
The high watermark for them, yeah.
Yeah, I have to admit, Hex Induction Hour not one of my particular favorite. I mean, it's a great album, but it's not one of my because it's not. So I came in at that weird period in the 90s, where I suppose it's a bit more shambolic than usual, and there's a lot of introduction of like electronics and stuff like that. Maybe the old school fans weren't into that; they just wanted, you know, drums, bass, guitar. But that stuff is
I
love that stuff.
I strongly agree with you, Clive. That's for me some of my favorite fall stuff. I mean, I Am Curious, Orange, like that. You know, when it just gets so weird and woolly and yeah, it's the melody. It's like it gets more melodic, but then you've still got this kind of struggle.
Even further out, like into like I'm talking like I mentioned, Light User Syndrome. I know some people don't like that. Levitate is another album people don't like, but again, as a whole, it's brilliant. I'm wondering, like John Peel, I'm not sure if it works in terms of single tracks, but as a whole, I think Levitate is a fantastic album. But a lot of people have checked out at that point. So anyway, I suppose our roundabout way for context for this book is the world of fall fandom is, I mean, we've only been talking a short, but you can already tell just it's kind of obsessive, right?
Yes, yeah.
And so so I suppose we should talk about
the book.
Yeah.
Well, this is really the train spotter's guide, because this is extremely thorough. And I suppose, I mean, it's you know, worth quickly talking about the fact that, like, it's set up basically, you know, each studio album is given a kind of an explanation of like how it came to be, and then you get the author's own kind of feelings or review, and then you get the contemporaneous, whatever, how you say that word, reviews from the press, and then sometimes you also get like how it's now viewed in, you know, and that's kind of it. Like that's kind of the book in a nutshell.
Yeah, but it's a framework, right? So on top of that, you also have what they were doing live at that time.
Yes.
And what's quite jumps out actually is quite fascinating is almost from the very beginning. It's amazing how like the refusal to play the new album, like, oh, that's done, and they're already playing brand new songs on stage that they've never heard, right? Which is
actually, sorry, but I did have one more question, because I did not at any point in my life get to see the Fall play live
once.
Okay, all right.
Probably at the worst the band.
I was going to say because so it's so, you know, Mark Pringle, who, you know, he interviewed Marky Smith, actually. It's on his website quite early on for some college radio station or something. But then he talks in his reviews. He often talk about like having seen them on this tour, that tour, and they're wildly variable as comes through in the book, right? Like depending on what was going on, depending on how Marky Smith was doing, you know, you might get an incredible performance, or you might get something that barely was a concert, right?
If I hadn't moved to Japan, I probably would have seen them like 300 times or something. But alas, it was not to be. That was not my path in life.
And they never came to Japan at any point?
I feel as if, isn't there some point in the book they do, because I was looking out for that, oddly enough, because they said sure as shit didn't, since I lived here, because I definitely would have gone to see them. But maybe in the 80s.
Okay.
I feel as if there was a mention in the book at some point that they did, right? Maybe because they would have gone to Australia, right?
Yeah, I was thinking. Yeah, I mean, rather famously, right?
So I think they would. I think they must have played here at least once at some point. I think, but not since I've been.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the time you did see them was when? And during what?
I could probably tell you exactly if I looked in the book, but it would either no, actually it would. I can't be specific. I think it would have been between February and April of 1999.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
In London.
around about the time of after Levitate, the Marshall Suite.
Yeah, it was. I think it was. Yeah, it was a pretty dire band. It was when Tommy Crooks was in the band playing guitar, which is not. He's not a fan favorite. I don't know why specifically, but I remember people being really aggressive to him from the crowd. Actually.
Wow.
Yeah, they didn't like him. And, yeah, Mackie Smith was wandering on and off more than usual and twiddling with amps and all that malarkey that he did. It certainly wasn't a good gig by anyone's standards, but it was the only time I'd ever seen it. It was awesome for me. I just
yeah, you were seeing the Fall.
Yeah.
Where was it? Where did you see them?
It's a fairly big. Was it the Astoria? Maybe I think it might have been the Astoria. It was a fairly big.
In London.
Yeah, it was fairly
big.
Yeah.
So that could have explained it too. Apparently, according to this book, his shows that were outside of Manchester, particularly shows that were in London, tended to be more lackluster affairs because he didn't give a fuck at all about. I can't
remember if it was. I think it because I went there a couple of times to see some. I think maybe the support group or the first support group was another band I like quite a bit. Grandaddy.
Okay. Never heard of them, but okay.
Anyway.
Okay.
Right. So how do we progress from?
I honestly don't know because there's like too many albums. Maybe I'll go and see if I think.
Here's a question to you then, Nick. Here's a question to you, right? How much of this material do you now own? Whether it be digitally or physically, or like, have you actually gone the whole getting everything, or you haven't quite got there yet? Or?
No, but what actually upon finishing the book, I thought like I've done this occasionally over the last few years. I have gone and a band that I like, but that I haven't necessarily heard everything. I have had a strong thing. I want to start at the very beginning,
right,
and go through to the end. And this is my job. I'm thinking about maybe 2024 being the year that I just do the Fall from beginning to end. Like maybe not all the compilation albums, not all the live albums, but certainly all the studio albums and anything else that is studio recorded.
Nick, don't you get it? You must get them all.
Well,
it's even those shitty I mean, yeah. So that's the other thing as well. As I know this very well because of the timing I came in and my Fall fandom was growing, happened to coincide with that crazy period where every month there was a new
Fall album,
it was so random. They were like tracks from, sometimes they were live things from different shows, or they were just the same as usual, just taken from an album and just put in, and all those. It would be very easy to just ignore it all, but crucially, there are gems.
Oh, I'm sure there are
in there. So you do kind of have to sift. Like what I did, the way I've got it formatted, I've got all the Fall albums and singles, and then I've got a few files which is just random. I've identified all the tracks that aren't anywhere else from those compilations, and I just put them all into one big folder, and then made my own. Well, some of them would have ended up. I'm sure there's some stuff in that 4 CD which weren't from the album. They probably would have put obscurities and stuff on there, right?
But we should talk about this off air, Clive, and perhaps, So as I said, it's something that I would love to do. I would love to go back.
No, but like I said, you should if you're going to do it all.
The early stuff has grown on me a lot since then, so that's one thing. As I drive around in the car nowadays, and I still go back, I still have the albums that you made for me, and then I various other things. I do have the full Peel as well. Like,
oh, that's great.
So I have all the Peel sessions. But yeah, going like listening to Industrial Estate and stuff like that. I get off on it way more than I did for some reason the first time I didn't quite.
I had one of my nicest moments in the cinema in recent years was going to see High Rise.
Okay, yep.
Adaptation of the J.G. Ballard book.
J.G. Ballard, yep.
Yeah, which I love the book, and the film was pretty good actually. I don't know if you saw it. Did you see it? It's actually pretty good. But yeah, one of the best things about it is it ends with Industrial Estate. I was just sitting in a theater and hearing Industrial Estate was just great.
Nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I said I'm gonna go take a look and see where I made notes. But did you make any notes of specific things you wanted to talk about?
Not really. I mean, so well, let's say this out the gate. It's 600 odd pages, and
yep,
I enjoyed every minute of the hours in the bath that I spent reading this book.
Yeah, I devoured it. In record time, I have to say. The fact that I didn't realize it was anywhere near that big, gives you a sense of how. So I mean, my copy is Kindle, but it's still
You know, many baths were had, much beer was consumed, and I was just happy as Larry, sat there in the bath for like an hour at a time. However, I would like to come at this from so the thing is, this is catnip to me. Right. So it's kind of difficult to me to be, even though, I mean, I'm not sure how much in this book I hadn't read before, because I did used to go on all those forums and in some way it's a bit of a someone tried to print the internet out kind of book, isn't it? There's a lot of stuff from the fall forums and the annotated fall, and you know, fascinating websites, and you do understand, well, it does feel a little bit sometimes like I should be reading this on it, but I don't give a shit because I'm enjoying reading it in the book.
Yes.
I'm happy enough. But again, trying to be objective, and I don't know how much of this I didn't know, I pretty much read all of this before, heard these stories before, but I just enjoyed reading it all again, and I'll probably read it again one day. You know, it's, if you're a fan, then I mean, you'll just enjoy the heck out of it, right? And you will get there are some little nuggets of things quite interesting for me was sometimes when they identify riffs stolen from other songs and stuff.
Yes,
that was kind of interesting. Some of those I didn't know. But we talked about this a little bit before when we were talking. I can't remember what we were talking about. We were talking about another book about, it was a band or a person or something, and because it wasn't someone we were obsessed with, we could be a lot more objective about it. And I think I said at that point, I said something along the lines of, well, if this book was about, for example, the fall, then I would have had no problem and thoroughly enjoyed it, because if someone put out another book with pretty much the same stuff in a slightly different order, I would probably enjoy reading it. You know, I'm kind of a lost cause when it comes to, so I don't know. I don't feel, I certainly feel qualified as a fall fan to say that this is full of fantastic information, but I don't know if I feel qualified as an objective non-fan to, I mean, what do you think? Is this a good primer if you were a new fall?
No,
was it a bit
I don't think so. I do think the two books we've already mentioned, I think Simon Ford's book, Hip Priest, is the place you want to start. Which is it's only going to take you, it's not going to take you to the end, you know, but it'll take you far enough, and it'll give you you know, a pretty good, I mean, I think it's a great book. And then if you want something that you can't really trust, if you want an untrustworthy narrator, but one who's really funny and whose words you're going to be hearing if you're listening to The Fall, then you should read Renegade by Mark Smith, because it's a rip-roaring, it's in the same category in my mind as Lemmy's White Line Fever, or whatever the hell it's called. You know, these are the stories from the not entirely trustworthy narrator. But I would say if you're going to that next step, then for sure this is but I don't know if somebody who's not already a fan is going to get much out of, 50 pages of descriptions of live albums.
Yes, and I suppose the test is, so let's say, for instance, a band that I know you like a lot more than, I don't mind them and I like some of their stuff, but I don't have the obsession that you do. If there was a similarly sized book about Sparks, I think you would enjoy it just as much, where I would probably struggle because I haven't been bitten by the bug.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so I think, so I would have to guess. Yeah, I mean, it's odd, isn't it? I mean, there isn't that, but I do think there's a certain truth to what John Peel says about the fall, in the same way as Stephen Thrower has a similar argument about Jess Franco, right?
Right.
You can't really cherry pick. You're not really getting it unless you see it all. Right?
See it all, yeah. But it's funny too that Sparks is actually not a bad analogy to make, just because I can't think of many other bands who also you could say that thing of always different, always the same. I would say if you look at their entire body of work, it's never album to album quite the same. There's always an adjustment, and sometimes they're quite big, but there's this thread throughout of the two brothers that's always there, right? It's inescapable. I mean, so here's another question. So one thing that came up in this that I don't know much about it is the few Marquis Smith like side projects or collaborations with other artists, and how does that stuff stack up?
Well, that's another fascinating thing, actually, is you could make a good compilation, I'm sure someone has, is the Marquis Smith guest appearances, right? So, I mean, like a great one is Marquis Smith with the Inspiral Carpets doing I Want You, right? That's fantastic. I mean, he just brings another layer to it, right? And what's that one? The Heads of Dead Surfers, Longfin Killy. He's on a few Elastica tracks. And,
right.
There's quite a lot of that stuff to track down once you're aware of it. And it's probably in here somewhere, right? It's probably in an indie.
Yeah.
It probably has all that stuff. But yeah, no, that's the amazing thing about him, because it's not just been one band, it's a whole bunch of different bands across 40 years, and any other band he's involved in, he twists it to his way. It's kind of a remarkable thing. I'm not quite sure how he does it, really. So even though I understand you should respect all the other musicians, and it's not all about him, and of course now there's a post-fall band, right? The House of All, with the Hanley brothers and
okay, is this a new the Extricated, or is this separate?
No, this is another one. This is another one. This is within the last few months they've had now. I haven't heard it yet, actually, but I'm quite interested. Yeah, so it's not to diss those other people, but when Marquis Smith says, if it's me and your granny on bongos, it's the fall, he's kind of not wrong.
Yes.
Now, you might not want to hear that if you're in a band with it. I understand that. But that doesn't mean that's not right in a way. Although, yeah, I mean, that core drums and, that run is kind of extraordinary. And again, you would say, I mean, blind. I mean, we could gush all day, right? But this is supposed to be a book. I don't know how much more we have to say about the book.
Yeah, I think if you're a Fall fan, you need to have it. And if you're not a Fall fan, why are you not a Fall fan?
Yeah,
you need to start with the music maybe, and then get to this, or do like I did, come via music and maybe Hip Priest and Renegade. That can be your primer, and then yeah. You owe it to yourself. If you don't already love the Fall, you owe it to yourself to make yourself love the Fall.
Ha!